นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ And when you come on retreat, you'll hear a lot of teaching about practicing mindfulness, being mindful, being fully aware, cultivating this quality we call the one who knows or the knowing. And that's because we're all weak in this when we begin practicing the Buddhist path, practicing meditation. And so it is a very central quality to our practice, and we need to develop it more. The ability to know, pay attention, recollect things. But of course it's not practiced in isolation. So often we talk about the practice as cultivating sati and panya, mindfulness and wisdom or insight. And we talk about the practice in these ways where we're developing different qualities together, like the 5 indriyas or the 7 bojjhangas, factors of enlightenment, and so on. When you're meditating, whether you're sitting, walking, or even meditating lying down, the central qualities you are developing are mindfulness, clear comprehension, sampajanya, which is considered, a part of wisdom, a part of discernment, and then discernment, wisdom itself, panya. And Luang Por Chah said these 3 qualities of mind are like friends that help come together to complete a task. So he'd say well, if you want to lift a heavy object on your own, it may be too much for you, or it may be that you might even damage your back in the process or something. But if you have friends, you may get more done, you can get that job done better. So we need both mindfulness and clear comprehension and wisdom. These 3 friends we cultivate together. So clear comprehension literally means clearly comprehending what's going on in that moment. So if you're practicing mindfulness of breathing, it's clear comprehension of the breath, going in, going out, knowing whether it's going in, knowing whether you're at the beginning of the breath, the middle, whether it's going out, knowing the nature of the breath, but also knowing why you're doing it. Keeping that in mind, you have full comprehension, full understanding of why you're training in mindfulness of breathing, what the goal is, what the purpose is. And also looking at other qualities that are coming up in your effort to practice, whether your effort is too strong, which may be counterproductive, make you even experience physical or mental pain, or is your effort too relaxed, too loose? All of this is coming with clear comprehension of what you're doing from moment to moment as you meditate. Mindfulness is putting your mind on the breath or with the breath, keeping it in mind. And panya is discernment And the practice of mindfulness, clear comprehension, supports the arising of panya, but sometimes you have to use panya first as you're meditating. If there's a particular problem or something coming up, you may need to give it what we call wise consideration. Cultivate some wisdom or insight around that problem. So the way we develop wisdom in the beginning of our practice is cultivating this quality, yoniso manasikara. We say reasoned reflection, wise reflection, directed to whatever we're involved with at that moment. So the practice of meditation, sitting, walking meditation, is an ideal situation to cultivate wisdom as well as mindfulness. Because you tend to be like on a retreat, you have fewer distractions than normal. You can really dedicate your whole attention and effort, physical, mental effort, to the practice. So it's also a time to develop deeper wisdom and understanding of what you're doing. That might be understanding. Usually, yoniso manasikara is directed to two main things. Obviously we can think about many aspects of the practice, but there's two main aspects that we focus on. One is cause and effect, or causes and conditions. What leads to what? Where has this come from? Why is this happening? What are the causes that have led up to this, whatever we're experiencing, whether it's a physical phenomena, such as a pain or pleasure in the body, or mental states that we find we're caught into. What are the causes and conditions that have led up to this? So giving some wise reflection to that, as opposed to just getting lost in things and attaching to things with this sense of self. So it's reflecting on the cause and effect, cause and result process in life helps you already to start to understand this teaching of not self. If you're feeling negative, depressed, irritated, frustrated in your mind as you meditate, you're looking for the causes and conditions that have led up to that, rather than just attaching to it and say, I'm angry, I'm fed up. Meditation is the perfect time to really look and learn more about what you're experiencing, and particularly if you're suffering, why are you suffering? Where does it come from? What's really going on? So that involves a lot of question asking. We say investigation, asking questions, observing, looking, learning. The other main aspect of training in wisdom, yoniso manasikara, is breaking things down into component parts. Because one of the delusions of self and attachment to our experience of body and mind as a self is this sense of solidity. It's a complete package. I'm here, and you attach to your five khandhas as self, but they seem to come up all together, all at once, all the time. So we have this feeling or perception of being like a person at the center of our experience, with the leading, taking on the leading role in the drama of our life. And that becomes very solid. The less mindful, the less insightful we are, the more solid this sense of self becomes, whether it's forming around physical experience, mental states, feelings and memories. The more solid, the less mindful, the less insightful we are, the more solid the 5 khandhas appear. And that is why we suffer so much with them, because they are subject to causes and conditions, but the sense of self says, these are mine. You have a sense of ownership. So of course, say with the feeling khandha, vedana, you usually want pleasure. We're always seeking pleasure, unconsciously or consciously, deliberately, knowingly or unknowingly. We are seeking more pleasure, and we seek to get away from pain. And that's because we've taken ownership of the feeling khandha, this group of experience, pleasure, pain, and neutral feelings. And neutral feelings tend to stimulate dullness in the unenlightened mind. So each feeling brings with it its problem when we take ownership of it. It conditions the mind in a certain way. So even if you attach to pleasure with a sense of self, this is my pleasure, I want it, I want more of it, I want to keep it, it's also setting us up for suffering because it's impermanent, doesn't last. So the second aspect of yoniso manasikara is looking into that and breaking things down. So say just breaking the feeling khandha down into its component parts, this pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, and then feeling that is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, what we call neutral feeling. And this is applied to the body, that's 3 types of feeling, and then the mind. We can have mental pleasure, mental pain, mental neutrality. You may be just seeing something and it hasn't got a lot of meaning for you, so it may be a very neutral feeling arising of just seeing. Whereas some sights immediately stimulate a strong reaction where you really know, oh, I don't like this, I don't want this, or I do like this and I want more. You'll notice that on retreats when you're cutting off a lot of your sense stimulation. If you're say in a monastery on retreat, very little stimulation, anything new comes into your field of vision that may attract your attention because there's so little that you're seeing. You're in the forest, trees, trees every day, same path, same building, same place. We get used to that, so then anything new attracts attention. So probably the most attractive thing maybe you see someone drive into the monastery with a new car or some fancy car or a different make of car that you haven't seen before or that you've previously been attracted to. Well, that will pull your eyes. Or what is the most attractive thing? Probably the physical appearance of a member of the opposite sex. When you see somebody who's attractive to you, that will pull your eyes because it brings stimulation and pleasure. Whereas if it's something you don't like, say you see a mess, say you see some animal feces on the path, it's like, oh, I don't like that, don't want to step on that, so you avoid it. This is feeling being stimulated by sight, seeing something, and with it the feeling is the tone of the experience. So pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. So as we meditate, part of our practice, particularly as we become more mindful, more calm, is breaking things down to what's going on here. Not just I like this, I don't like that. But saying, well, what's going on? Why do I like it? What's happening? What's the reason I like something? Well, it stimulates pleasant feeling, and we get attached to that. Food is another one. In a monastery, you have the 1 meal a day, or on retreat, you may be keeping 8 precepts, 1 meal a day, or or just one main meal a day. So that one main meal becomes interesting to you because it's the only time to stimulate your taste buds. So before you've even eaten, the anticipation of food starts to affect you physically and mentally. The thought of one just quelling the pangs of hunger, the unpleasant feeling of hunger, and then the actual pleasant feeling of different kinds of food may stimulate the imagination, fantasy, and then if you get smells and then sights of the food, the whole process of anticipating pleasure becomes stronger. The actual eating is very quick, and quickly the pleasure dissipates, doesn't it? When you put food in your mouth, it's a moment and then it's gone. Most of the pleasure is in leading up to that, the anticipation, expectation. But Yoniso Manasikara, you're breaking it down into the different steps up to that, and the process of what's going on in your mind prior to eating and then the eating, and then even carrying it through. So you're reflecting on food in a wider sense. Where's it come from? Somebody grew that, purchased that, made that, brought it. If it's in a monastery, brought it to the monastery. If it's at home, either you or somebody else has brought it in, prepared it, cooked it. So there's where the food came from, what food it is, the actual kind of food you're eating or want to eat, the taste, the smell, the color, the shape. And then actually eating, the process of eating. And many people find on retreat, when you eat mindfully and you're reflecting on what you're doing, you realize, well, eating is quite tiring. You have to chew. And the more tougher the food, if it's something that's sort of crunchy, like peanut brittle or some bit of tough meat or some tough food, it can be quite unpleasant even. When you become mindful of what's going on in your mouth, sometimes it's even painful. And then you have to swallow and digest food if you overeat, or even if you eat the right amount, but you eat all in one go, like in a monastery or on retreat, you get a full stomach. So then you feel tired and you have to adjust and allow for that. It takes a few hours to digest the food. Maybe sitting meditation after a meal is difficult, so you have to go and walk, move around. Then of course you eventually have to go to the toilet. Toilets are places that we don't like to be. They smell, they're dirty, but we have to keep cleaning them. You have to wash up the plates after your meal, deal with the waste, the wrapping, the packaging, the rind, the skin, the leftovers. If you're thinking with reasoned reflection about the whole process, then it starts to expose some of the burden of being a human being, having to source food, prepare food, eat food, get rid of the waste and so on. It changes your way of looking at food. This is breaking things down into the component parts. Even the moment of tasting, you can break down into the taste, the feeling, the perception, the thought, what you think about it. Pleasure and pain is like that. You can break things down into the component parts. And this is training in wisdom and helping you to see through the delusion of self, which is usually supported by just attaching to more superficial labels that we put onto experience. Like, I like this, therefore I want this because I like it. I don't like that, I don't want it because I don't like it. Now you're going deeper than that, using mindfulness, using investigation. Ajahn Chah said, if you don't know how to practice this, this practice of wise reflection to develop wisdom and understanding, he said, start with the body, your physical body. As you're sitting here meditating, we have this teaching from the Buddha, the 31 or 32 parts of the body. We can go through them one by one. This is this process of breaking down into component parts, the physical body that we call me, myself, that we just take for granted. And one by one you separate these 32 parts out. So hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, bones, bone marrow, flesh, sinews, the organs, heart, liver, kidneys, lungs, the intestine, small intestine, big intestine. And to do this you may need to go online and just Google an anatomy book or something like that, just to help you to start with. Or you just observe from the world around you. Either way, you're paying attention to and focusing your mindfulness on each part in turn. Whether you're saying the name, visualizing, actually putting your attention on that part while you're reflecting on it. And the idea is to place each part of your body as if on a table or on the floor in front of you. Separate them all out, just like you would do with a car, separating out all the different parts of a car, the wheels, the seats, the body frame, the steering wheel, the controls, the pedals, then the engine, all the bits of the engine, the exhaust, the carburetor, the fuel tank, etc., until you've got all the parts spread out and you can't really see a car anymore. And in the same way you can spread out the parts of your body and you don't see a body anymore. You don't see me with your name and your kind of habitual identification. You don't see that when you spread these individual parts out. This is training in wisdom. Backed by mindfulness, because you need to pay attention obviously to this, and it's not easy in the beginning. That's why you need the different friends to do the task, the mindfulness, the clear comprehension, the wisdom, working together. But it's a way you train in breaking through the delusion of self. We're saying, what is it? What is it that I take as a self? And in regards to the body, well, these 32 parts, where is the self in any one of those 32 parts? If it's difficult at first, you just take one part. So traditionally we say hair of the head, but it could be any of those 32 parts. The liquid parts, the solid parts, whichever part, and you just take one and just really think it through. Say the hair of the head. Where is the self in the hair of the head? When you notice hair falling out, you comb or brush your hair, or when you have your hair cut, hair drops to the ground. Where is the self in each individual hair there? Has its colour, has its smell, has its look, but where is the self in that? You can take it one step further and look at the component parts of each hair. It's made up of 4 elements, and the sort of prominent element in hair is the solid element, the earth element. That's why you can grab hair, touch it, cut it, do things with it, because it's solid. It still has a little bit of moisture in it as well, but it's mainly solid. And if you go to hairdressers, you see all this hair, you can't tell whose is whose, because once it's left the body, you just don't know whose is who. Hair, just when you see it on the ground or in a pile, all the sense of self-identity and what you previously attached to as self is gone. Another aspect is the unpleasant unattractiveness of hair, like all the other body parts. It's unpleasant if you don't wash it, it smells. If you don't style it, even just messy hair we can get annoyed with. Oh, your hair looks so messy, your hairstyle is awful, having a bad hair day. So not even just its nature to get greasy and dirty and smell, but just the hairstyle already is a problem for us because of the identification with it, the attachment with it. Well, this is wise reflection, going on, thinking about hair, what it's made of, what it is there a self in it or not? Asking questions, observing, looking. And you can see if you start practicing that when you're calm, when you're peaceful, then you can do it for a period of time. If you go through all 32 parts, by the end of it, there's this big question: where is the self in any of this? And nowadays, with science and technology, we can even transplant organs. It's an amazing thing. We can give life from one person to another. It can be a live transplant, like a kidney transplant, or we can transplant when someone just quickly, after they've died, passed away, you can harvest organs and put them into someone else. It's an amazing thing, but it's also a reflection on not self, isn't it? If you find a match for your kidney and you have kidney disease, well, you can have a lease of life by getting a kidney transplant. One person can maybe even sacrifice their kidney for another. All of this is pointing to the deeper truths of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. The way we're seeing this is by training in yoniso manasikara, wise reflection. And not even just in meditation, we're training in wise reflection in all aspects of our life. Keeping sila, why we keep sila, what's the benefit of it, how to do it in different situations, how to follow the 5 precepts or 8 precepts takes wise reflection. Even offering dana takes wise reflection, how to do it well, effectively, what's useful, how to do it, and so on. Many of the Buddhist teachings are reflections on using wise reflection to solve basic problems in daily life, how to live together successfully as humans in society, how to help each other, how to teach the Dhamma, how to listen to the Dhamma, how to keep precepts, how to practice generosity, as well as how to meditate. And all are coming from the wisdom of the Buddha. He's trained his mind to understand cause and effect, karma, to break things down so the delusion of self and self-ownership in different experiences is questioned and then let go of, relinquished, because it's a delusion. Many of the stories from the life of the Buddha and the teachings he gave are reflections on this, using wisdom in daily life to solve problems, solve one's suffering by understanding impermanence or understanding cause and effect and knowing, that's just the way it is, I can't do much because the causes and conditions have led up to this bit of suffering, so I have to accept that. And the idea of wisdom is it always helps free our mind from suffering in different situations, bringing us to the truth rather than just being lost in our delusions or our likes and dislikes or our ideals of how things should be. It's helping to see how things really are rather than just lost in how we feel they should be. And that brings peace to the mind. When you see the way things are, it brings peace. The very first Giantica Story, one of the past life stories of the Buddha, is teaching this. The Bodhisattva, the Buddha in a previous life, was born, and he was a merchant. He was somebody who had done a lot of business and built up his business empire, business interests as trading between cities. And he had lots of ox carts, and he had a store of money that he could buy products and then send them to the next city. He was living in Varanasi, and then you'd take his ox carts to the next city to sell things. He had a friend, another trader, merchant, who also had a large number of ox carts. And at one time they're both planning to go to the next city to sell their products, because that's what they did. And the Bodhisattva was training in wise reflection, so he thought about it. Well, what's the best way to do this? My friend also wants to go, and he has lots of ox carts, lots of products to sell. This could be an issue if we both go at the same time. We won't get such a good price. It'll be challenging to take such a large number of ox carts and products and people all at the same time, 2 different companies going. So he went to his friend and said, look, it'd be better if we went at different times. So do you want to go first or second? If you go first, we'll wait a few weeks and then follow you after. Or if we go first, you can come after. And his friend thought about it and said, well, probably best if I go first, thinking it would be easier. If I go, there'll be more food along the way, grass for the oxes, more water, more fruit and vegetables in the forest that people can pick to eat as we go, because they're going through the wilderness and it'll take many weeks to travel. They'll need food and water. And he's thinking, the road, if I go first, then the road will be in a better condition, because I've got 500 ox carts. They're going to have an effect on the road, and then when I get to the other city, I'll be able to sell all my stuff before the other group arrives. So his friend opted to go first. Whereas the Bodhisattva, using wise reflection, thought it through and said, well, if he goes first, that's good, but if we go second, or our ox carts will go through the wilderness, they'll flatten the road with their heavy wheels, so it might actually improve the transport. That other group will have been through, they'll have dug some wells, so now there'll be water available, we won't have to dig the wells. The oxes from that first group will have eaten the grass, the old grass, and fresh shoots will be coming up, and fresh edible vegetables and shoots on the trees will be coming up, so we can eat them. And then when we get to the city, that other group will have already negotiated a price, so we can just turn up and sell our products, because in those days the negotiation of a price was a big deal. It took ages to do. So if they've already done it, the first group, we'll benefit from that. So thinking it through, this is an example of Yoniso Manasikara. The Bodhisattva went second and saw the advantages in that. Meanwhile, his friend went on first, took his 500 ox carts and all the people and all the products through the wilderness, and they encountered a group of evil spirits, yuccas. These beings that can be very evil, angry, greedy types, that historically the legend is they like to eat the flesh of people. So they met them in the forest, in the wilderness, but they were smart yuccas, and they pretended that they were another group of traders coming back from the city, and they threw water over their ox carts and they were all enjoying themselves to give the impression that they'd come on an easy journey from the other city, and there was plenty of water, and they were happy because they sold their things. Because what they wanted to do was fool the friend of the Bodhisattva into believing them that they didn't need water. They said, oh, you don't need to have all those heavy water pots on your ox carts. They're weighing you down, making you slow. You might as well dump them because there's plenty of water ahead. So they believed them, and they went on their way, and the friend of the Bodhisattva, all his ox carts, they were weighing everyone down, and they found there was no water. They'd been tricked. So they all started to be dehydrated, and there was no water and no food. And they dumped all their water, so eventually they died of starvation and dehydration, and the yuccas came down and ate them all up. Just left the bones, and then all these ox carts and products just sitting there in the wilderness. A few weeks later, the Bodhisattva sets out on his trip with his group of 500 ox carts, and they meet the same group of yuccas, evil spirits, masquerading as traders, telling them that there's plenty of water ahead. They'd got lotuses on there. They'd picked up lotuses from some ponds and draped them on their trucks, and they got water. They tried to convince the Bodhisattva that up ahead there's plenty of water. You might as well get rid of your heavy water pots so you can travel easier. But the Bodhisattva didn't believe them because he practices yoniso manasikara. He doesn't just believe everything he sees or hears. He questions. So then he went away and questioned. And he had a meeting with all his people, and he asked these questions. He said, do you believe these people that are saying up ahead there's plenty of water and food and you don't need to worry? And he asked these questions, and he said, has anyone met these people before? No, no one's met them before. Is there any signs of water up ahead? Anyone seeing any rain clouds? No. Anyone heard any thunder? No. Anyone felt the cold wind that comes when there's rain? No. So I asked a lot of questions. Everyone decided these people, we can't really believe them. They're saying there's a lot of rain and water up ahead, but we don't believe it. So they didn't discard their water, they kept it, and that allowed them to go through the wilderness safely. The evil spirits couldn't get them, and they actually came across the corpses of their friends having died of starvation, dehydration, and they realized what had happened. So they loaded up the more valuable of their friends' goods, and they went on to the city and did their trade safely. But that story is given as an example of yoniso manasikara. You're not just believing what you want to believe or what you see, but being able to question and think for yourself. And really you're doing that in meditation. We say practice mindfulness, cultivate insight, where you're questioning your own attachments, belief in self-view, attachment to the body as self, attachment to feelings as self, attachments to thought as self, questioning and seeing the conditioned nature of experience. Things arise according to causes and conditions. You're practicing the Dhamma here, that's a cause and condition. Practicing mindfulness, listening to Dhamma, reflecting on Dhamma. You're educating your mind, learning, so that you can break through some of the delusions which cause us suffering. So ultimately it's wisdom that ends your suffering in life. When you see a mood of anger or depression as impermanent, that helps you to let it go. Or when you understand the causes behind it, you can let it go. When you don't get what you want, you can see, that's just part of life. There are causes and conditions leading up to not getting what you want in certain situations. When you see that, then you can accept and let go, rather than going to despair and frustration. So this is why we use the phrase, it's just the way it is. That's actually coming from deep and profound wisdom. It's just the way it is. Some things you get that you want, you get. Some things you want, you don't get. But being able to reflect in this way clears away suffering and delusion from the mind. So it's something we have to train in. It's part of our meditation practice. So maybe this morning I'll just say this much, and for the rest of the session we can practice some sitting meditation.
Allaya Tapakata Saduka